I tear your thread and break your loom. Depart to the desert, demon!
Remember when the animated shows weren't afraid of referencing popular Marvel characters? Fantastic Four had a good time with this, as they always managed to sneak in a cameo from the wide variety of characters that they had. But the X-Men animated series never shied away from showing us almost all the mutants they could in a particular episode, with the stories that will probably take years for the Marvel Cinematic Universe to bring to the screen. Yes, even after their prolonged success, it's rather complicated to imagine that the plots from the X-Men animated series could be brought to the screen. And with the revival of the show X-Men 97, the series has yet again proven the variety of characters they can pull off in the animated format. The latest storyline seems to hint at an appearance from the much-beloved X-Factor, with Forge already playing a significant role in the series. But which X-Factor would this be? Or one can ask, what is an X-Factor? Let's look at this group of mutants that sounds awfully similar to X-Men, but stand quite apart and have their own differences. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. What is X-Factor? Comic book version. The X-Factor has stayed parallel to the X-Men for quite a long time, and it makes sense to confuse the two. But before we jump into the differences, let's get some context on the X-Factor and its origins. Imagine you started a group with a particular purpose, and the group was quite a success. Over time, the group grew, and new people started joining in. But after a while, you realize you cannot identify with anyone in the group, and start seeming like a stranger. Yes, that often happens to some of us, but what did we do? We returned to our original plan by getting back to the original people. And that's precisely what the X-Factor was about. A rendition of the X-Men consisting of the very first members to carry on with Professor Charles Xavier's legacy. The group debuted in the 1985 issue number 1 of X-Factor, where each of the original members of the X-Men had moved on from their group. The original members of X-Factor included Cyclops, Angel, Beast, Iceman, and Jean Grey. Jean Grey had just been resurrected by Reed Richards from her form as Phoenix, even though she was rumored to be dead by the other members. After finding out about the group's status, Jean contacted Angel and asked for the original members of X-Men to come for a meeting. Even though Scott initially had a hard time accepting that Jean was back, the other members convinced him to join them for the gathering, and it was here that they formed their version of the group called the X-Factor. To the public eye, X-Factor Incorporated was focused on hunting mutants and taking input from the people to find potentially dangerous mutants and put them into custody. However, their primary objective was to help these mutants and train them so they could take control of their powers. At the same time, the group would operate under the name of Exterminators whenever they were required by the authorities or someone else. But this would just be the beginning, since over the years, there has been a variety of renditions of the group, and each rendition had its own goal and purpose behind creation. Soon after the original X-Factor came, the government ordered an X-Factor group consisting of Havoc, Multiple Man, Wolfsbane, Strong Guy, Quicksilver, and Polaris. The government formed this group to respond to Mystique's team, the Freedom Force. Other X-Factor groups would soon follow, each taking inspiration from the previous one. Some of these groups had a completely different goal than the original one. Soon, the groups would come together to form a more stylized rendition titled the All-New X-Factor, and it would see quite the success with the group's fans over the years, and became an essential part of the X-Men narrative. However, one of the group's renditions, created by the government, had a significant role in the X-Men comics. Valerie Cooper formed this group with Havoc as the team leader, and other members as the ones we discussed. They were given a variety of missions, including going against Mr. Sinister, teaming up with the Hulk, and even hunting for Cable, who was responsible for getting a hit on Xavier. Soon, Valerie lost the truth of her team when they discovered her involvement in the Sentinel program. Around this time, Forge would replace her and become her liaison. Following this, the team would undergo a lot of tragedies, with Havoc leaving the team over a team member's death and putting Forge as the team leader. New replacements to the group would include Mystique, who had made quite the reputation as a mutant terrorist, and others like Shard, Wildchild, and even Sabretooth. Later, Havoc, who had formed the Brotherhood during his rogue period, would discover that his friends were alive and return to the team, while the terrorist members of the group would rebel. Forge would leave the group following this return. Still, following that, the group wouldn't last very long, as Havoc himself was killed due to an explosion, even though it was later discovered that he was moved to an alternate reality. Another major version of the X-Factor was the X-Factor Investigations, which was more like a detective agency led by Jamie Madrox. Yes, the creativity behind the name was something that was almost always lacking, ever since the first time the name was coined. The agency was initially supposed to be called XXX Investigations, but luckily some of the original members suggested that it sounded too much like the group was investigating pornography. Members of this group included Siren, Richter, M, and Layla Miller. The team faced some competition from Damian Tripp's agency, Singularity Investigations, considering they were the two central agencies after the events of the Decimation. This group would investigate the events of the Decimation, the worldwide event that wiped out the mutant powers of the beings. But things won't be easy for them, considering Layla Miller joined the team only to make sure that they aren't successful at discovering the truth behind the events of the Decimation. But soon, they would succeed in their investigation. Their success would prompt Valerie Cooper to convince them to work for her, considering they were working all by themselves. But the team would manage to get out of any chances of working under her. Their reputation also led them to work with Xavier himself during the events of World War Hulk, considering Hulk had targeted the Professor, and he was a member of the Illuminati. It is clear that there have been various X-Factor groups over the years, but we request you to focus on the one with Forge, considering it has an essential role to play in this video, and the fate of the X-Men. How is X-Factor different from X-Men? Now that we have some idea regarding the X-Factor, let's figure out how this group differs from the X-Men. There are a lot of exciting details that make them stand apart from each other, and the primary one is that even though both of them had the same goal, they took a different route to achieve it. The X-Factor might be a spin-off of the X-Men, but both groups' true intentions changed massively over time. While the X-Men was a plan of Xavier's to help the mutants, over the years the motive changed, and soon Magneto replaced the Professor, and the original heroes saw the focus had shifted to something else. Similarly, the X-Factor was focused on working under a particular representative, but not being transparent about the work to the individual. Soon, their later popular renditions would be completely different. The team would work under the government, particularly Valerie Cooper, to safeguard the government from mutants. But one can clearly see the X-Factor has undergone the most change over time, while the X-Men somehow still managed to stick to their reputation through thick and thin. The X-Factor initiative sounded cool, but something was inspiring in their adventures once Valerie Cooper came in, and used the name for her team of mutants for a purpose dedicated to safeguarding the government. Now that we understand this team, agency, or whatever you want to call a group of mutants, did you know that this team was recently referenced in the animated series X-Men 97?
We are a mutant team recently formed under the auspices of the federal government.
What do you mean?
The story of X-Factor in X-Men the Animated Series. X-Men 97's revival take on the original X-Men animated series has clearly emphasized how much things have changed since the first time Charles Xavier put together this group of mutants. With Xavier gone, the group is now reduced to only a few original members sticking around. Still, fans can see these original members in the photo on display at the school. The two members fans can see in the photo are Angel and Iceman, who left the group for their own reasons. Iceman was tired of the continuous pestering from Xavier and left the group, while Angel didn't give a proper reason. He would reappear later as Archangel amongst the four horsemen of Apocalypse. This minor detail indicates the vast history the group has had, and the variety of events they've made it through over the years. Even though new viewers might take some time to adapt to all of the details that keep popping up occasionally, it won't be surprising if one of the episodes of the ongoing series gives us a proper recap of the other group members. Each episode has managed to factor in a detail or two, using characters marking their debut in the show or returning after a long time. One such character appeared in the show, and might be responsible for much more than we expected. Episode 4 introduced us to Mojo, and at the same time, updated us on Storm's status after her powers were lost during an attack on Magneto's hearing. Storm is visited by Forge, who wants to help her regain her energy, and it is only later revealed that Forge is responsible for creating the gun that led her to losing her powers. The comic book had a romantic development between these two characters, which we see develop in this particular arc, but upon learning that Forge was behind the development of the weaponry, Storm turns her back on him. And right around then, Forge manages to indicate his involvement with another team of mutants. This team could be none other than the team of mutants known as the X-Force from the comic books. The X-Force has a history in the X-Men animated series. They appeared in the original show when Bobby Drake asked them for help. Back then, the team members included Havoc, Polaris, Wolfsbane, Quicksilver, Jamie Madrox, and Strong Guy. Even the mutants were facing a hard time from the general public. This team of mutants was working for the government like the comic book version, and they were accepted as heroes by the people. During this run of the X-Factor, Forge acted as the group's liaison to the government. During his last appearance in the X-Men animated series, in an episode titled Cold Comfort, the X-Men had to go against the X-Force as Xavier's team had landed in their training space. Forge decided to use the opportunity and pit the two teams against each other, only to realize it was not going to end anytime soon. They would stop the fight, and this would mark the last time the X-Factor came across the X-Men, only to be teased now. The Polaroid on Forge's wall of memories is an attractive detail as it shows all the X-Factor members except for Quicksilver, even though he was a part of the team in their original appearance. Forge even mentions that he served as a member of the government team, but he could be serving with his team even after we saw him following the events of Quicksilver coming to terms with Magneto being his father in the Family Ties episode from the original series. But this is not the only reason the X-Factor might be sneaking into X-Men soon. How are they joining X-Men 97? Forge has another attractive appearance apart from the Storm arc, in which he plays a significant role. Even though the opening credits of each episode of the series have seen some changes, one of the significant changes was in the new opening credits for episode 6, where 2 characters and names were removed entirely, and these were none other than Magneto and Gambit. Both of them are presumed dead during the Genosha massacre, and this is a clear explanation for the absence of these 2 characters in the credits. But fans might have noticed that Nightcrawler gets his title in the opening credits. This was the one designed for his major appearance during the original run of the animated series. There were a lot of plans for the character in the original run, but none of these plans actually came to fruition, and we only got to see some arcs where he would appear as a supporting character. But another character appears in the opening credits, and it also references an entire scene that we've just discussed. Forge appears in the credits in a scene that resembles the X-Factor's encounter with the X-Men, following some other scenes that resemble scenes from the original animated series. So far, each of the opening credits has played a significant role in the episode and later in the series, and this is another reason for the X-Factor to join hands with the X-Men and investigate the events of the Genosha massacre and face Mr. Sinister together. Considering that Mr. Sinister is very well prepared this time compared to his last attack, it would only make sense for the X-Men to have help at hand. And this would also add to their numbers now that they're facing the massive loss with the death of most of their comrades. But there's another possibility, considering that most X-Men were busy dealing with their issues. What if this was the right time to bring the New Mutants in on the action? The animated series has permanently successfully established fresh characters as major ones. This example was set in the case of Jubilee, and fans of X-Men can clearly say that the animated series has done a way better job with Jubilee than various live-action X-Men films. Even though the live-action New Mutants was a failure, they are quite famous, and we can see that X-Men 97 might do a pretty decent job of bringing them into the action. Marvelous verdict. Forge showing up randomly could have been part of the plans to bring Storm back into action, and this is taken from the comics, but the dude isn't an ordinary character. We all saw him do the Doctor Strange level stuff when he was battling against the adversary, and it was clear that this would be a new detail to his powers. But seeing the character's potential go unused would be boring. Now that Xavier is set to return, and Forge has also stated his acquaintance with the Professor, we can expect them to come together with a larger plan. Rest assured, X-Men 97 won't be taking things lightly anytime soon. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!
Stand down, Rogue.